So earlier today on stream, I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers, Sean C, react to another one of my favorite YouTubers, FD Signifier, about the video called The White Rapper Paradox. It's a rather old video. It was released back in December of 2023, and Sean C's reaction is also fairly old. But it was really interesting to me to rewatch what is essentially one of my favorite YouTube videos through the eyes of Sean C. If you don't know, Sean C is a hip-hop critic. He hasn't really uploaded anything since 2023, but he does do a lot of live streams, and I just have always really enjoyed his content. He's a very funny dude, very intelligent, and FD Signifier is, quite frankly, one of the best people to watch if you want an in-depth look at Black culture and the way that Black culture is represented within media. He's just a genuinely amazing guy to talk to. I wish I could talk to him. I'd love to have a conversation with him. But he's an amazing guy to listen to, and I credit him with a lot of my growth in the understanding of Black culture and how Black culture is represented in Black media. Just a genuinely incredible YouTuber. I'll leave his links down in the description down below. But while I was watching this reaction and this video with my chat, of course Eminem came up as a subject of the white rapper paradox, the white rapper problem, because he is the main focus of what a lot of people think of when they think of white rappers. And I wanted to give my input, not necessarily around Eminem, but around the culture that Eminem cultivates within white people in general. Now, obviously, I'm white. I don't know if you could tell that, but I am white. I grew up white, and despite my upbringing within the poorer dregs of society, white supremacy still exists within those places. The biggest thing about white privilege is that a lot of people confuse it with rich privilege or class privilege, but that's not it at all. White privilege exists throughout all forms of society, including within the poorest dregs. But because I grew up in poverty, a lot of the white people who I've met often talk about Eminem as if he is some sort of savior. Now, I guess the best way to start off this discussion is to talk about my personal feelings toward Eminem as an artist and his music. I think that objectively, Eminem is probably one of the greatest lyricists of all time. I'm not saying he is the greatest, but I think you would be lying to yourself if you say that he didn't at least break like the top 15 in terms of artists. He's one of the biggest artists in the world for a reason, and we can't just attribute all of it to white people loving other white people in Black dominated spaces. It's very easy to get lost in a lot of the lyrical, miracle, spherical type of bullshit that has arrived from Eminem's influence onto the hip-hop world, and especially with white people who try to do hip-hop, they almost always cite Eminem as one of their influences. But for me personally, I like Eminem, and I do think he's one of the best, but in terms of my favorite artists, he doesn't even crack the top 10 for me. I would say it's hard to admit that he cracks the top 20. In terms of hip-hop artists in general, there are tons that I just enjoy more than Eminem. And that's not to say that there's a bunch of that they're not white. Watsky and Wick Whitney are two white artists that I greatly enjoy. Both of them, I think, have very unique and interesting styles that a lot of people simply don't possess. Wick Whitney is very good at a more slower and methodical kind of hip-hop. He does a lot of storytelling, as well as just kind of brings you into his own emotional flow state. He doesn't do fast rapping, or at least not that much of it, and he's more on the chill, relaxed side. I believe somebody called it cloud rap is about where he sits. Whereas Watsky really likes to flex his English degree, is the best way that I can put the average Watsky song. Watsky is an English major who loves poetry and literary context, and you can tell that by his music, so he's an absolutely fantastic artist. Both of these guys I rank higher than Eminem in terms of personal taste. But again, it's not like I don't enjoy Eminem's tracks. I do think that he's got some pretty stellar songs out there, I do have a lot of his music on my personal hip-hop playlist, but at the end of the day, I think that he's pretty much overblown. Which brings me to my discussion today. As a white person who grew up in poverty and who enjoys hip-hop, I do not trust white people who tell me that their favorite hip-hop artist is Eminem. The thing about Eminem is that while he is a very respectful person of black culture, I have heard him be highly talked about in terms of personality, showing respect to the culture that made him, and even admitting to only being a guest in the house of hip-hop. He understands that hip-hop is first and foremost black culture. He understands that he is only somebody who is tangentially related to the culture, and he understands his place as a white artist. Unfortunately, a lot of white people out there, and including white hip-hop fans, don't understand that. And they will often make Eminem out to be this god who came in and dominated an art form that didn't welcome white people before Eminem showed up, which is completely false. By the way, there were white rappers before Eminem, and successful ones as well. The Beastie Boys is probably the most famous example. Of course, you have Vanilla Ice, people like Milkbone. There were all sorts of white artists before Eminem came onto the scene. But the way a lot of white hip-hop fans will talk about Eminem, they talk about him as if he broke some sort of barrier, as if he destroyed some sort of idea that white people can't rap. And that's where you get a lot of the white rappers who will come up with songs where their whiteness seems to be all they can talk about. Tell me if this lyric sounds familiar. I may be white, but I can rap with the best of them. You've probably heard something very similar to that, if not that exact thing, inside of pick a white indie rapper. Pick one. Just fucking go on SoundCloud, roll the dice, and find one, and you will undoubtedly hear them talking about their race in terms of rapping. Even those who are half white, like Logic, can't seem to stop bringing up their race in terms of rapping. And so a lot of their rap feels disingenuous and unfortunately feels like they're trying to bring more attention to their skin color than they are the skill that they may or may not possess. Because I'm not saying that every white rapper who does this is bad, but what I am saying is that if you're constantly going to be talking about your skin color in hip-hop, all it does is a disservice to you. And when these guys often cite Eminem as their amazing, great artist that is just their absolute favorite and their inspiration, you can see that they never really learned anything from him. And so a lot of these white guys, instead of respecting the culture like Eminem does, instead of admitting to themselves that Eminem is just a guest inside of this culture, they will constantly just deny what M has said and done in the past and just pretend like he's this god. Like he's this god when he's not. He's just a guy. He's a guy that happens to be lyrically talented, and that's where he gets a lot of his fame from. The other side of the coin is white people who will say, I don't really listen to hip-hop, but Eminem's really good. What the fuck are you talking about? Right? Like, a commenter in my chat brought it up earlier where they were like, Eminem is hip-hop. There's nothing different about Eminem's brand of hip-hop that separates him from the genre entirely. If you say you don't like hip-hop or you don't listen to hip-hop, but you like Eminem, the only thing left is racism. What you're telling me is that you don't like the fact that black people make the genre, that black people make the music. And the reason I'm saying that is genuinely because it does not make any logical sense to listen to someone like Eminem and then claim that you don't like hip-hop as a genre, because Eminem is hip-hop. He makes hip-hop music. He makes rap music. He doesn't make a different kind with different contexts or different beats or anything like that. He's not like, for example, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was pop music, right? But his brand of pop music, his creations were so audibly different from a lot of what was out there. That is why he became known as history's greatest music artist, history's greatest entertainer, because it was so different than what normal pop was at the time that it genuinely it created this brand of music that is so recognizable to anyone who listens to it. Another great example of this is, for example, Sleep Token. Sleep Token often gets put in the metal genre, but they're a part of something called progressive metal, where their music kind of transcends this genre. It's one of the reasons Sleep Token is my favorite band of all time, because their music genuinely does not sound like your average metal song. But where Eminem's concerned, his hip-hop's just a dime a dozen, people. Like, he's not unique. He's gifted, he's good at what he does, but so are tons of other artists in the genre, both old and new. There are so many people who do what Eminem does, and that's part of the very breed of hip-hop. That's part of the DNA of hip-hop. I think that a lot of people just kind of forget. Like, rap, R-A-P, stands for rhythm and poetry. It's legitimately linguistics, flexing your linguistics muscles. That's why a lot of people really didn't like the mumble rap era that came through, because a gigantic part of hip hop has always been its focus on lyrical complexity, or what was actually being said. Unlike your pop or your rock music, where you can, lyrics matter, but they don't matter as much as they do in rap and hip hop. And that's actually why a lot of people who like rap and hip hop will, once they hear the right songs, will like country music. Because old country was also about lyricism, but lyricism in the form of storytelling. It was about lyricism in the form of dredging up emotions through telling a story, whereas hip-hop is mainly a genre about dredging up emotions through the very fiber of the artist's being. In my opinion, what makes hip-hop and rap so great, it is that it is the best genre for knowing how the artist feels, while country music is the best genre for telling a story. And this is something that a lot of people just don't seem to understand when it comes to hip-hop and rap music. And so when these white people come along and they're like, I don't really listen to hip-hop, but I like Eminem, I have no other course of action than to believe you're just racist. Because you do like hip-hop. If you like Eminem, you like hip-hop. But for some reason, you can't bring yourself to admit that you like black people, and their experiences, because that's what a lot of it is. But that's my entire thing. That's the Eminem problem, in my opinion. It's not Eminem himself, it's the way that white people, both white hip-hop fans and white people who don't like hip-hop, treat Eminem. They treat him as this this god who has created this unique brand of music that no other person has ever made, when in reality, he's like all of the other good artists in the genre. He's good at what he does, and what he does is hip-hop and rap, and I just don't trust you if you are a white person that puts him on too much of a pedestal, because I think you've fundamentally misunderstood what made Eminem so great.